Period 5, APUSH exam cram from 1848 to 1877. Abolition really grew during this time, growing from the reform movement of the last time period. Slave rebellions like Nat Turner's, who claimed he was a prophet and killed many whites in Virginia, helped to convince the South that they needed a stronger hold on slavery, such as through slave codes. Reformers like Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and David Walker published bios and books talking about abolition. However, this time was mainly characterized by an expansion of the Monroe Doctrine to manifest destiny and expansionism. One area was in Oregon, where the term 5440 or fight was used to fight against British and Russian invasion of areas around Oregon. The territory of Texas, which had been a part of Mexico, fought 10 years for independence and finally was annexed by the U.S. Mexicans were not happy, and following a border dispute, the Mexican-American War started and lasted from 1846 to 1848. Eventually, the U.S. Army crushed the Mexicans, and they signed the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo, which basically gave U.S. much of the land in the Southwest today in exchange for millions of dollars. The U.S. basically now expanded westward from the South all the way to the Pacific. However, after this war ended, there was a big dispute about this land and whether it would allow slavery or not. The Wilmette Proviso was a northern idea that said all territories would be free. However, this didn't pass the Senate, which had equal slave and free state votes. So a compromise of 1850, created by Henry Clay, passed, which allowed California to become admitted as a free state, but the other lands in the Southwest could choose. This was, of course, the idea of popular sovereignty. The South also got a stricter fugitive slave law that the North had to follow. Zachary Taylor was a general who fought in the Mexican-American War and later became president as a Whig, which was the party of Henry Clay. He didn't like this compromise, but it passed anyways, when he mysteriously died in office. However, this compromise didn't last long. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed, which allowed these territories to come into the Union based on popular sovereignty once again, repealing the Missouri Compromise of 1820 before, which had said that all states south of Missouri, the 3630 parallel line, could be slave states, while adding a new state of Maine, carved out of Massachusetts. This was supposed to balance the slave-free states' power in Congress. This also caused a lot of tension, especially when Charles Sumner, who was an abolitionist senator from Massachusetts, was beat with a cane by Preston Brooks of South Carolina in a congressional session. Fighting in Kansas eventually led to Bleeding Kansas, where many people died as well. Slaves also weren't much better off when, in the Dred Scott v. Sanford case, the Supreme Court ruled that blacks were no more than merely property. Eventually, abolitionists such as John Brown took more extreme measures. Brown took part in Bleeding Kansas and also raided the arsenal in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, where he was captured and then executed. New political parties during this time arose as well. The Free Soil Party was anti-slavery and didn't want it in new territories, and eventually they would hope to form the Republicans. The Know Nothing Party was made of nativists who were also anti-immigrant. Eventually, the Republican Party formed and became more anti-slavery. In the election of 1860, Republican Abraham Lincoln defeated Stephen Douglas, who was a very powerful senator from Illinois. The two had actually met 2 years prior in a Senate race where they had national debates known as the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Eventually, Douglas had won. But eventually, of course, Lincoln won, and this angered the South, who decided to begin secession. They really didn't like Lincoln being elected. Lincoln wasn't totally anti-slavery at first, and he actually just wanted slavery not to spread to new territories. Soon, however, with the attack at Fort Sumter, the Civil War started in 1861. The war dragged on for a long time, with heavy casualties on both sides. This war was the one with the most deaths in U.S. history, even till today. The Confederacy, the South, was winning at first, but then started losing after the battles of Gettysburg and Vicksburg. In 1863, Lincoln also issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which announced that all slaves were free, but this of course didn't apply to the southern states who had succeeded. Eventually, tech helped to win the war. Northern iron ships, railroads, industry, and telegraphs helped to push Union troops to defeat the South. In the March to the Sea, General Sherman destroyed the South in half by cutting up Georgia and ending supply lines. William Tecumseh Sherman would eventually become a big war hero. The next year, Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, met with Ulysses S. Grant, the Union general, at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, and this officially ended the war. Days later, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater. The U.S. passed many amendments to help new slaves after the war. Amendments 13, which freed people from slavery, 14, the Equal Protection Clause that was given to all people and men, and the 15th Amendment, which granted voting for all men. You can remember these by the acronym Free Men Vote. After the war also came more attempts to help former slaves become readjusted to life. The Freedmen's Bureau tried to help slaves by creating sort of like welfare for these slaves. It gave slaves welfare and a new chance to reconstruct their lives after slavery. Reconstruction was also planned in the South by Northerners. Presidential Reconstruction, like what Lincoln wanted, was carried out by the new president, Andrew Johnson. However, Congressional Reconstruction took place when radical Republicans wanted to punish the South and had more power than Johnson. The South hated this and still implemented discriminatory policies like black codes, while vigilante groups like the KKK started to cause blacks more terror. Sharecropping replaced slavery, and many blacks still weren't able to gain much freedom, and they were tied to their lands. So this has been Period 5 of APUSH Exam Cram. Make sure to sub if you haven't already, share these videos with your friends, and see you in Period 6.